Good evening. A dear friend of mine suggested that I make a video on Asperger's explaining the symptoms and how people on the spectrum face discrimination outside of the workplace. So I will gladly elaborate on that. One of the first symptoms is the person exhibits antisocial behavior. Many times they'll want to be alone. They'll want privacy. We value privacy because we also are very territorial about our own space. Most people would think that's rude or disrespectful, but it's our way of protecting our comfort zone, number one. Number two is that it affects the person's ability to read nonverbal communication, such as facial expressions and body language. Now, luckily for me, I was able to read body language somewhat because I've been trained and also read a lot of books, but it's still a difficult area to read because each person has their own body language. On the flip side, we're also harder to read than the average person because we often have blank expressions, blank stares. Our emotions don't go to extremes like that of the average person, except, of course, when we're angry. We'll blow up like volcanoes. It's like Bruce Banner turning into the Incredible Hulk, which is why some people mistake us for being bipolar. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean we're dangerous per se, but that's a meltdown. That's when the person is overstimulated and has to have some kind of a cathartic release. Now, most people with Asperger's have above average to genius IQs. We're not in any way, shape, or form retarded, nor are we like people with classic autism that you would see that are nonverbal, sitting in the corner, oftentimes beating their heads against the wall. And no, we're not like Rain Man either. Rain Man is a savant. He doesn't like somebody with Asperger's. If you want to know what it is, see some old episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation. The character Data exhibits all the traits. He's brilliant. He's very knowledgeable about many subjects, and he also is quite capable of doing many things. But one thing he has a hard time understanding is the dynamics of social interaction. They didn't hardwire him to be a social creature, but more of a technical one because he's an android. Now, that being said, there are many situations for Data that are awkward. He often says exactly what he's thinking and doesn't use a filter like the regular person. That doesn't mean that he's tactless, it's just that he doesn't know the rules per se. I've had to learn that by trial and error, which leads me to another point. People with Asperger's aren't very good liars. That's what separates us from sociopaths because sociopaths, 9 times out of 10, know the social rules. They know how to read people and body language, and they're very good at social interaction, but also quite adept at playing off people's emotions. That counteracts any possibility of somebody on the autism spectrum being a sociopath. Now, just because we don't wear our hearts on our sleeves doesn't mean that we're apathetic in any way, shape, or form. It just means that we don't exude emotion like the average person. We actually do feel empathy. That's one misconception about us. But the problem is because we don't get overly sentimental and dramatic about everything, people don't understand. We want to relate to the average persons. Sociopaths and narcissists, they don't care. That's the difference. Now, another symptom of it is repetitive behavior. We like to do things repetitiously. We like to do things in a set pattern because that's our comfort zone. Many people expect us to be spontaneous, but that's not always how it works. It gets tiresome for the average person. Sometimes they lose patience, but they have to understand that that's not the way that we're hardwired. That's one thing. Many people with Asperger's don't make direct eye contact. I've been trained to do that. I learned from watching that movie Adam that sometimes if you don't want to look the person in the eye, look at the person's forehead. They won't notice the difference. Or many of them also stare at some things. When I was a teenager, I used to stare at girls in school that I thought were attractive. They thought I was a creep. At the time, they didn't understand, and because they were so shallow, a lot of them were probably afraid that they were going to wind up in the trunk of my car before I took their skin off, because that's what the media has told them. They didn't understand that I found them attractive, but that's neither here nor there. So, another symptom of Asperger's is oftentimes the person will be obsessed with a certain topic and many times hyper focused. We have intense focus on some things. I currently am fixated on Islamic culture, which is why sooner rather than later I'm going to get a kufi hat. But I'm going to get the beanie kind because the classic kufi is for prayer, and many Muslims might find that offensive. So I have to find that medium balance. I'm also doing it despite the Donald Trump campaign because they are Islamophobic. So in the future, you'll hear me post some political things, say some political things in some of my videos. So those are the main symptoms. So, and the way we face discrimination outside of the workplace is people think that we're sociopaths, or they just think that we're creepy and weird, and they don't want to associate themselves with us because we make them feel uncomfortable. Fortunately for me, I have a good set of friends that are all teachers. They've had experience with this, so they have the know how. And lastly, one other symptom is that we often take things literally. When I was a kid, my father took me to see the physician who had just had a root canal. He said that a root canal felt like someone just kicked you in the shin. I was wondering, how could that be possible? If you just had a needle injected into your gums, how could you feel it in your shin? Well, I didn't realize he was talking about the intensity of the pain, not the actual feeling. Another time, I remember having a conversation with a Chilean family friend of ours about how things operate differently in the southern hemisphere. She said that the toilets there flush backwards. I thought that she meant that they spit all the contents out. I didn't realize she meant that the water drains counterclockwise rather than clockwise, which isn't true, by the way. That's all been debunked. The reason why certain toilets drain a certain way is because of the way the drains are designed. But we didn't know that at the time. So I have a hard time sometimes with sarcasm. A friend of mine from Ireland, he's sarcastic. Sometimes he makes snide jokes or whatever. But that's not anything bad. We're good friends. I understand that's a big part of the Irish culture, which is why I let it pass. But he also is a good man and he's honest and straightforward. He said he normally doesn't like people, but he likes me for some reason because I'm honest and forthright and I'm consistent about what I say. So those are the dynamics of Asperger's. If I think of anything else, I will keep everybody posted and apprised in the future. So I hope you find this interesting and have a good one. Bye.